The office still smelled like lemon cleaner and yesterday's coffee. I slid my badge, stepped into the Denver floor, and let the silence hold me for a beat. 4 days of bereavement leave. My father's funeral. A folded flag. A closed casket. I came early to catch up, not to start a new life. My laptop woke like it always did: blue light, a soft fan, a reflexive check for updates. Then the subject line surfaced: change in employment status. 3 sentences, no greeting. Terminated for not maintaining sufficient presence during a critical period. No call. No meeting. Just a line that turned the room colder than the AC ever could. I didn't cry. I took a picture. Then I forwarded the email to my personal account, printed it to PDF, and saved it twice more. I moved like I was carrying porcelain, slow, exact, and steady enough to keep from shaking. My father used to say stones don't fight the river. They hold their place and let the water show its temper. I pulled a small cardboard box from under my desk. A desk plant with stubborn green leaves. A framed photo of my team at last year's service awards, 10 smiles, mine a little tired but proud. Handwritten notes from people I'd mentored, short lines about first promotions, first successful launches. I placed each one like a promise I refused to break. Footsteps gathered. A cough. The elevator chimed. Mark stopped first, eyes flicking from the box to my face. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. Lila came next, hands already shaking, whispering that this had to be a mistake. I kept my voice flat and kind. I said I was fine. I wasn't, but composure is a language too. Word travels faster than policy. Screens lit up. Slack pinged like rain. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else said, for taking a funeral? I let the noise live without me. I've learned that outrage is a match. Strategy is a pilot light. Craig arrived with that brisk, managerial stride, clipboard gait, budget eyes. He didn't meet mine at first. He addressed the room, ordered everyone back to work, said my packing created disruption. Then he turned toward me and tried on concern like a borrowed suit. He asked me to proceed to people and culture and keep the process professional. His voice didn't tremble. His jaw did. I reminded him he approved my bereavement leave. He said context changed, like compassion has an expiration date. I watched his mouth as he spoke, tight, rehearsed, a man protecting the spreadsheet, not the people. I told him I'd go to people and culture. I also told him something else, quiet enough to sound like air. You'll want to remember this decision. He flinched, almost nothing. Megan from People and Culture was a silhouette at the end of the hall, neutral cardigan, careful posture, eyes that said more than her job allowed. I nodded to her, then turned back to my desk and placed the framed photo on top of the plant, as if the leaves could carry the weight. More colleagues drifted near the edges, pretending to print something, pretending to refill water. A room full of adults behaved like children at a door, listening for thunder. Are you really fired? Lila breathed. I told her I received an email at 6:07 a.m. The time mattered. Numbers tell stories even when people don't. I sent myself one last file, my cross-regional playbook, anonymized, distilled, built over years of failures that led to fewer failures. It wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. I cleared my browser, wiped personal tabs, signed out of tools. Then I slid a sticky note into the box. A quote my dad wrote in block letters for my first promotion. Hold steady. Water remembers who stands. Craig reappeared, this time closer, lowering his voice like it could soften facts. He mentioned brand risk, public perception, smooth transitions. I pictured him practicing in a mirror, timing sympathy to the clock. I thanked him for approving my leave again, because gratitude can cut if you use it right. He told me to be reasonable. I told him I already was. Would you have argued? Shouted? Demanded an audience with the board? I've seen those scenes. They leave smoke and no structure. I chose a different soundtrack, the soft rasp of a cardboard flap, the hush of a photo sliding against glass. I hugged Lila with one arm and told Mark to breathe. Then I asked everyone to get back to work for themselves, not for him. At the elevator, the building exhaled, vents, distant phones, the hum that happens when people pretend nothing happened. I balanced the box on my hip and pressed the button for a floor I used to lead. The doors opened like a held breath finally letting go. I glanced once at the row of desks, at the empty chair that would swallow someone else by noon. Inside the elevator, I checked my phone. One missed call from a number I knew by instinct. Rob Keller, Northline Dynamics, had tried to recruit me last year, and he never called this early. I didn't answer. Not yet. A stone doesn't rush the river. It lets the current reveal its banks. The doors slid open on people and culture. Megan waited with a manila folder and an expression that was all apology and no permission. I walked toward her, steady, carrying a plant that somehow looked greener under fluorescent lights. I had already made my choice. No rage, no spectacle, no free headlines for anyone. Just documentation, memory, and a promise I owed to the woman in that team photo. I stepped into the room and closed the door behind me. The box rested on the chair. My hands found stillness. Let's begin, I said, because I was finished with endings. And somewhere beneath the noise, I felt the river turning toward me. The door clicked behind me like a soft lock, and the room smelled like dry paper. Megan's office was minimalist, pale wall, muted art, 2 chairs that tried to be gentle. She slid a folder toward me with both hands, the way people serve bad news in a nice bowl. Severance on white paper. Non-disparagement. 8-month non-compete that stretched across 3 states. The legal font looked polite. It always does. She asked how I was holding up, but her eyes had already measured the bruise. I told her I'd seen the email at 6:07 a.m. and printed it twice. I placed my phone on the table and opened the photo, the one that spelled it out. Terminated for insufficient presence during a critical period. Approved bereavement leave suddenly renamed an offense. Something changed in Megan's posture, less corporate, more human. She asked, quietly, whether there were any performance write-ups. I told her there weren't. She knew there weren't. We both stared at the sentence that made the room colder by 10 degrees. She excused herself to check a point with legal. The hall carried voices like a vent carries dust, thin, drifting, almost words. I imagined the phrases passing between attorneys like coins, at will, compliance, exposure. When Megan returned, she sat before she spoke, as if the chair might steady the truth. She explained Colorado's at-will doctrine in the tone of someone reading a weather report. How companies can end employment without cause, even when the timing looks cruel. She paused. Then she added the line that mattered, "This feels wrong." Her voice leaned on those 3 words, then stepped back into protocol. Off the record, she said they had no documentation, no counseling trail, no plan. On the record, she offered the packet, the signatures, the neat closing of a file. I could have asked for a fight. I didn't. I read the non-compete twice. The radius was swollen, the months too long. I pictured rooms where someone decided fear would hold employees in place. I initialed where the tabs asked me to initial. I signed where the line waited, not because I agreed, but because I was done with this room. Megan's shoulders dipped, relief or regret, maybe both. She walked me through the exit checklist like a nurse changing dressings. Badge, laptop, final paycheck schedule, benefit runout, each item a blade filed smooth by repetition. She lowered her voice and told me I could contest. She thought a judge would look at the timing and see it for what it was. I thanked her for saying the quiet thing out loud. Would you have sued? Would you have burned it all down just to feel the flame? I wanted the heat for a moment, wanted the wind of it, wanted the noise. But I kept seeing my team's faces in that photo frame, and I heard my father's river. Stones don't chase the water. They make the water change shape. I closed the folder and chose the shape I wanted next. We stood. She handed me the plant I'd set on the chair. Her fingers brushed a leaf like it might break. She told me she was sorry, which in this building qualified as rebellion. I told her to take care of herself, then watched her swallow the instruction because good people forget their names here. I left the room with a box that didn't look heavy until you held it. The elevator hummed me downward, a soft mechanical lullaby for endings. On the sidewalk, the city exhaled into me diesel, wind, a food truck warming up on the corner. I loaded the box into my trunk and sat in the driver's seat without turning the key. Silence grew legs and walked around the cabin. Then my phone lit up like a birthday cake. A storm of messages, Mark, then Lila, then Omar. Short lines, fast fingers, loyalty written in shorthand. We're with you. This is wrong. Say where. Photos of the floor without me, my chair empty, my screen dark. A calendar screenshot with 3 meetings titled, Where is Lauren's file? I breathed in and let the ache settle where it could do less harm. I opened notes and typed a heading, Apex Exit Timeline. 6:07 a.m. Termination email. 7:12 a.m. Packing witnessed by team. 8:03 a.m. People and culture meeting. A second page, documents preserved. A third, contacts. My father taught me to fish by watching the surface. You learn where to cast by what barely moves. I watched the surface of my day, and it told me where to aim. The missed call icon blinked again, same number from earlier. Rob Keller. Northline Dynamics. A door I hadn't walked through last year because loyalty felt like gravity. I didn't tap it yet. Not out of fear, out of precision. There's a difference between a jump and a step. I wanted the step. Across the street, a bus sighed and pulled away. I remembered the last time my father and I stood by the river. Me complaining about a manager who counted pennies and forgot people. Him tying a knot one-handed, telling me patience isn't passive, it's muscle. Hold steady, he said, and let their current show you the rocks. I put the plant on the passenger seat and buckled it without thinking. The ritual almost made me laugh, and the laugh saved me from crying. I scrolled past the rage drafting itself into a social post and chose not to publish. No public fireworks. No feeding the machine the spectacle it craves. I would redirect the current, not splash at it. The phone buzzed again, Megan this time, a text that read, For what it's worth, I documented the timeline. Another text from a number I didn't save, Board will hear about this. I didn't need those promises, but I appreciated the friction they hinted at. Paper walls shake when enough hands press against them. I took one more picture of the email and backed it up to the cloud. Traffic thickened. Morning finally remembered this was Denver. I started the engine and let the radio find a station without commercials. My hands steadied on the wheel the way they do after a hard swim. I didn't know the plan yet, not in map form, but I knew the direction. Away from people who punish grief. Toward people who understand time and loss. I looked at the number that had called twice and hovered a thumb over it. No dramatics, no grand speech, just forward motion measured in inches. I called back and listened to it ring once, twice, 3 times. Before it connected, I ended the call. Not yet. One more thing first. I opened the camera and filmed a sweep of the passenger seat. The plant, the folder, the photo frame wrapped in a sweater. Then I said one sentence into the quiet car, just for me. I will not fight their smallness. I will outgrow it. The recording saved with a date, an hour, a private oath with a timestamp. I dialed again. This time I let it ring. A click. A voice I remembered from another conference room, another year. Lauren? I heard. Are you free to talk? I looked through the windshield at the river of cars, all of them moving somewhere. Yes, I said. But first, I need you to see one email. Rob picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting in the hallway of the call. He said he was sorry before he said hello, then asked me to forward the email. I sent the screenshot and listened to a brief, weighted silence. He called Apex's choice cruel and short-sighted. Then he asked if I could stop by Northline's Denver office now. Not next week. Now. Northline sat 4 blocks away, but felt like another city. Light poured through floor-to-ceiling glass like it had a badge. Reception smelled like fresh coffee instead of old carpet. A team stand-up hummed near the lobby, no fear in the voices, just motion. A young coordinator led me to a conference room with clean lines and no plaques about synergy. Rob walked in without an entourage. Open collar, tired eyes that still did the math, a notebook filled with actual ink. He didn't start with pitch or posture. He started with the facts. He read Craig's email twice, the second time slower, then put the phone down like it might bruise the table. Lauren, if this is how they treat you, I'm not competing with them. I'm competing with gravity. He laid out the offer like a map. Regional Division Director, Mountain Territory, authority equal to the responsibility I'd already been carrying without the title. Compensation stepped up, not sideways. A signing package designed for forward motion. I felt heat rise in my face and kept my voice steady. I asked about my non-compete, the 8 months of don't exist across 3 states. He didn't blink. Their counsel had seen Apex's template before. Overbroad, messy, ambitious in all the wrong ways. We'll take the heat, he said, palms open. If they swing, we catch. He didn't promise miracles. He promised resources. He asked me what I needed to build the outcomes I talk about on panels when people are listening. I kept my list short: clarity, cover, and the ability to hire on judgment, not fear. He wrote it down. Then he underlined cover. We toured the floor. People looked up and smiled, not because they had to. Logistics screens scrolled real-time data, ports, weather, bottlenecks. No one's face had that brittle corporate glaze I'd learned to hide under. In a corner lounge, a woman in operations asked Rob if she could steal him for 10 minutes. He told her to take 15 and pointed at the whiteboard like it belonged to her. I watched that small moment land. Culture is 1,000 small permissions. Back in the conference room, he slid a thin folder across the table. Not a contract. A briefing: client mix, target lanes, margins that looked like they belonged to grown-ups. One tab wore a post-it: potential wins if you lead. He said he'd wanted me a year ago and respected that I stayed. Loyalty is a virtue, he added, until it becomes a leash. I asked for time. A night to look at the edges, talk to counsel, let my pulse slow down. He nodded and said their lawyers would email a memo on my non-compete before sunset. He didn't ask me to keep it quiet. He trusted I would. At the door, he paused and lowered his voice. I hate that this is happening, but I love what we can build if you say yes. Outside, the air bit with a late morning wind. I walked the 4 blocks back to my car and sat without starting it, hands loose in my lap. The plant leaned toward the passenger window, like it had already chosen the light. I thought of my father, stones holding steady, water revealing itself. Sometimes the river isn't a force to survive, sometimes it's a path to follow. That evening I met Mark and Lila at a bar on the edge of town where the ice always sings in the glass. We took the booth in the back with the cracked leather and the little lamp that makes faces honest. Mark's jaw was set like a locked door. Lila's mascara had smudged into a soft confession. They didn't wait for me to ask. The office was sparking off the walls. 3 managers were pulling at the same rope in opposite directions, trying to claim my workload without admitting they didn't know the knots. Craig had convened an all-hands triage that felt like a fire drill with no exits. My shared folders were technically open, but functionally useless. The logic lives in the rhythm, not the file names. Someone asked where the weekly cadence lived and Mark said, in her head, and she's not here. They'd been told to absorb responsibilities, a phrase that sounds like a sponge and feels like a weight. People were angry because the math looked simple. If Lauren can be fired for a funeral, anyone can be fired for breathing wrong. Slack threads spun into side threads that sheared off into private DMs. A project manager cried in a bathroom stall and came out with a promotion she didn't want. Meanwhile, Craig sent an all-company note about resilience and misspelled my last name. Lila leaned forward and told me clients were already sniffing the gap. Account contacts had emailed to ask why their Monday numbers didn't match their Tuesday dashboard. One client asked point-blank if I was still the point of contact. Mark had answered with the truth that HR approved, she's no longer with the company, then listened to silence on the other end that sounded expensive. Cracks don't announce themselves. They just quietly get wider. I told them I'd met with Northline. Lila let out a breath like she'd been holding it since the morning. Mark kept his eyes on me as if he could hear the terms in my bones. I didn't sell the offer. I didn't need to. I said a door had opened where a wall used to be, and I intended to walk through it with my head up. We talked risk. My non-compete. The way Apex likes to rattle sabers even when the scabbard is empty. I told them I'd speak to an attorney before I signed anything. I told them I wouldn't recruit anyone, not a single person, not one text that could be read wrong. People deserve their own choices, not my shadow over their shoulder. Mark said choices were already being made. He slid his phone across the table. A screenshot of a calendar. Saturday emergency ops, mandatory. Craig had scheduled it for 7 a.m., like punitive sunrise. Under the invite was a DM from someone in finance. If we lose Lauren's framework, we are guessing. I felt the edge of the old anger press at my ribs and let it pass without taking root. The bartender set down water I didn't ask for, and I was grateful. I sipped and pictured the river again, not as comfort, but as instruction. Patience, not passivity. Direction, not reaction. I told Mark and Lila I would keep them out of my decisions. They promised to tell me only what I needed to know, not the daily cuts that make scars messy. We settled the bill in a ritual that said we still had control over small things. Outside, the parking lot smelled like rain that couldn't commit. Lila hugged me and whispered, "Make it count." Mark said nothing, but his silence sounded like a vow. I watched their taillights pull onto the road and waited there until the red turned to memory. Back home, I opened my laptop and built a new folder, Northline Due Diligence. I listed pros and cons until the cons felt like excuses. At 9:43 p.m., Northline's counsel sent the memo. The non-compete was wide enough to trip over and thin enough to tear. They cited cases, margins, the kind of detail that lets sleep in. I read every line twice and felt the first clean breath of the week. I drafted an email to an employment attorney whose name kept showing up in good places. Subject: termination after bereavement leave, non-compete clarity. I attached the screenshot and my notes, hit send, and stared at the blinking cursor like it could bless me. 5 minutes later, reply landed with surgical speed. Come Saturday morning. Bring the email. I'll bring coffee. Would you have taken the offer right then? No questions, no lawyers, just leap and hope? I wanted to. I also wanted to be the woman my father raised, the one who reads the Current before she steps. I texted Rob, I'm aligned in principle. Meeting counsel Saturday. Can we talk Monday? His answer arrived in under a minute. Monday, 8 a.m. Bring your questions. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and let the dark feel like a beginning. Saturday smelled like wet asphalt and overworked printers. I parked 2 blocks from the low-rise with the brass directory and breathed steam into cold air. Alan Pierce's office sat on the second floor, modest wood, quiet carpet, diplomas arranged like calm sentences. He handed me a mug before a greeting, the good kind, dark and steady. I slid the printed email across his desk and watched his eyebrows do the math. He read it twice, then the third time slower, hunting for any legal fig leaf. He didn't find one. He called the timing textbook bad faith, practically a training slide. Colorado's at-will doctrine, he reminded me, is a door companies love to lean on. But doors still have hinges. Misuse leaves marks a judge can see. He pointed at the sentence tying termination to my bereavement leave and let the silence underline it. I asked the question everyone expected me to ask, and then I didn't. I told him I wasn't here to sue, not today, maybe not ever. I wanted air, not fire. I wanted permission to move without looking back. He studied me like a chart, a trend line refusing the easy spike. Then he nodded, pulled the non-compete closer, and opened a casebook like a toolbox. 8 months across 3 states, with a scope large enough to trip over. No narrowed role definition, no genuine protection of trade secrets, just fear dressed as parchment. He walked me through recent rulings, how courts slice bloated clauses down to humane size. He said the agreement felt ambitious in all the wrong ways and fragile where it needed strength. If Apex pushed, he added, we'd push back, and he liked our side's footing. He advised documentation anyway, dates, screenshots, call logs, even the way the email felt. Bad faith leaves fingerprints you only see when you dust for them. He suggested a letter holding Apex to its own stated reasons, nothing loud, nothing public. A line in the sand that looked like a neat paragraph. I asked him to draft it but not send it yet. Would a courtroom fix the emptiness I felt, or just replay it louder? I pictured discovery, depositions, a winter of recaps pretending to be justice. I pictured my team's faces under fluorescent lights, the way fear bleaches good people. No. I needed momentum, not spectacle. I needed a river, not a bonfire. I told Alan the goal. Take an offer with clear eyes and strong footing. He said yes without the usual lawyer's romance about war. He would stand between me and whatever Apex threw across the line. He would answer their letters with facts and let me get on with building. He would sleep fine knowing his client chose growth over vengeance. I thanked him, and for once the word felt like a strategy, not politeness. My phone vibrated on the desk like a small, insistent animal. Mark had texted a photo of a 7 a.m. calendar block, emergency ops triage. 3 minutes later, a message from Lila could not locate half my process playbook. A line from Omar followed, short and surgical. Craig piled 3 jobs on one person. Screenshots arrived of Slack channels spinning in place, snapping into private DMs, falling apart again. Alan watched my face change shape and asked if I needed the room. I told him what I'd told myself. I wouldn't recruit, I wouldn't nudge, I wouldn't become their reason. People deserve their own choices without my shadow across the page. He said good, then added something that felt like permission and a warning in one breath. When cultures break, gravity shifts. Stand where your footing is yours. He printed a 1-page memo summarizing risk, remedies, and the narrow path forward. He stapled it with the kind of neatness that suggests a calm inner life. Document everything, he said again, softer this time, like a benediction. I folded the memo into my folder like a compass, not a trophy. Outside, the sky finally remembered how to be blue. On the curb, I read a text thread that smelled like smoke even without a fire. Craig had told the room to absorb responsibilities and show resilience, phrases that bruise on contact. A junior PM had cried in a hallway and apologized for needing 10 minutes to breathe. Finance pinged Mark privately. If we lose the cadence Lauren built, we will guess. A client had emailed, all caps in the subject line, asking who owned Tuesday's missed metric. I leaned against the car and let the ache pass through like weather. Then I opened notes and wrote a line I wanted to remember at 3 a.m. I won't fight to be reinvited to a table that punishes grief. I hit save and set a reminder to reread it Monday before any calls. Clarity is a small lamp. You don't waste it on the ceiling. Back home, the apartment felt taller, the way rooms do when decisions put air in them. I spread papers on the dining table like a map of the next version of me. Northline's memo. Alan's summary. My father's handwriting on a yellowed note. Hold steady. Water remembers who stands. I stood in the kitchen and let those words rinse what was left of yesterday. The group chat flared again, 8 names lighting up like a string of runway lights. Rosa said she'd been asked to lead my Monday kickoff without context or authority. Ben wrote 2 words, I'm done. Carla added, stability is a myth here. Then a quieter message from Jenna, the last to speak, always the sharpest view. Lauren, we applied last night. All of us. You don't have to answer. I stared at the screen and felt gratitude arrive like warmth after shocks. They weren't asking permission, they were reporting a choice. 8 resumes had gone where the windows were larger and the air didn't taste like fear. I typed back what I could live with later. Proud of you. Follow the process, no promises. Then I put the phone face down to keep it from stealing the room. I emailed Rob 2 questions about scope and autonomy, then closed the laptop. The plant on my windowsill looked healthier than it had under office LEDs. I watered it and thought about rivers again, how they carve canyons by refusing to hurry. Monday would need a decision and a boundary drawn in plain language. I rehearsed one condition in my head until it felt like bone. Night came without fanfare. I set 2 alarms, laid out the folder, and placed my father's note on top. Sleep found me with a final, simple thought I didn't argue with. Revenge isn't noise. Revenge is proof. And proof was waiting on Monday, behind a glass door and a handshake I intended to accept on my terms. Sunday evening tasted like rain and old promises. I watched the city lights beat on the window and let my phone rest on the sill, face down, like a coin I wasn't ready to flip. Northline's memo lay open on the table beside my father's note. Hold steady. Water remembers who stands. What do you ask for when the door finally opens? Status, or the room to become yourself? I called Rob at 7:41 p.m. His voice carried the low energy of people who work in facts, not fireworks. I told him I was ready, conditional, deliberate, clear. I wanted autonomy baked in, not promised later, cover when pressure came, and one clause I wouldn't bend on. If former colleagues apply, I said, I want them evaluated clean. No blacklist, no shadow punishments. Silence breathed once. Then he said, done. No sermon, no hedging, just a door clicking twice, unlocked from both sides. He added that his team had already prepped roles I could shape in the first 90 days. I felt something loosen in my chest I didn't know was knotted. We set a Monday signing, 1 p.m., Mountain Region HQ. I hung up and let the room become wider. Would you have asked for more? A grand title? A public announcement? Titles have ceilings. Autonomy has sky. I made tea I didn't finish and drafted a small, private list. What I will build. What I will ignore. Then I slept like the body knows when a war is over, even if the mind keeps watch. Monday arrived clean and unapologetic. Northline's office looked brighter than it had on Friday, though I knew it was me, not the windows. HR moved efficiently, 2 signatures, a benefits brief that respected time, not just budgets. The package was honest, roughly 45% up, a signing incentive with teeth, and incentives that rewarded outcomes, not theater. Rob shook my hand and didn't overcongratulate. We'll clear noise. You solve problems. He walked me through a quiet floor where names were still names, not badges. We paused by a wall map with red pins that looked less like territory and more like promises. Mountain Region is yours to shape, he said. Send your draft org tonight. We'll iterate fast. My chest steadied. My hands stopped pretending to be calm and finally were. I took the folder, thanked him, and said I'd be in tomorrow before 7. On the way out, my phone buzzed with a meeting request. Kickoff, Mountain Ops, Tuesday 7:30 a.m. Lauren Lead. The subject line felt like the first deep breath after a long tunnel. Outside, clouds packed tight over downtown. The wind lifted my hair and didn't take anything with it. I drove without music, listening to my own pulse find its quieter rhythm. Tuesday's prep lived in small, precise moves, an org sketch, a values page, a prioritized mess list. I wrote in verbs, not slogans. Listen. Clarify. Remove. Protect. Then I texted Mark and Lila, coffee tomorrow, 8:45, same spot. I'll listen more than talk. Copy, Mark replied. Lila sent a coffee emoji and a heart that made me smile despite myself. I put the pen down and let the evening become a finish line I didn't need to cross. The coffee shop on Colfax always smelled like cinnamon and secrets. We took the corner table near the fogged window where conversations soften on contact. Lila arrived first, cheeks pink from the wind, scanning my face for proof I wasn't faking okay. Mark followed, expression tight, protective, like he'd muscle traffic itself out of my lane if I asked. I didn't make them wait. I signed, I said, because some words deserve to land without packaging. Relief cracked across Lila's face like sunlight through blinds. Mark nodded once, the way men do when their feelings would break if they moved too fast. I told them my condition, clean consideration for any ex-Apex applicant, no backroom politics. I told them my boundaries, I would not recruit, not nudge, not turn their choices into my liability. Lila pressed her palms to the cup, breathing steam as if it were courage. She started listing what the floor felt like since I left, nervous jokes, brittle meetings, favors traded like rations. People copy your template, she said, and still miss the oxygen in how you did it. Mark added the numbers, missed cadence, doubled error checks, Tuesday reports bleeding into Thursday. He didn't say Craig's name. He didn't need to. Then Lila dropped the heavier piece with careful hands. Clayton Manufacturing called my cell, she said. They asked who their person was now. Silence stretched between us long enough to feel like truth. Mark looked out the window, watching a bus crawl by like a tired animal. Clayton doesn't make calls, he murmured. They just move freight. Unless trust slipped. Unless someone tugged the wrong thread and the whole weave showed gaps. I felt the tug in my chest and let it become data, not temptation. I told them I wouldn't touch any client conversations, that was theirs to honor or leave. But I didn't lie. Good service follows people, not logos, and people remember who stayed when it mattered. We let that sit without dressing it in strategy. Would you have told them to jump? To burn bridges and call it light? I wanted to pull them all into the boat and row. Instead, I told them the thing I could stand on later. If you move for your reasons, not mine. Lila nodded, eyes bright. Mark's jaw softened by a degree. We sipped in a quiet that didn't hurt. They filled me in on the rest. Weekend triage meetings under fluorescent confessionals. A Saturday no-pay push that asked for loyalty from people treated like line items. 3 parallel Slack threads debating whether resilience meant work until you break. And a manager who apologized for being human while approving someone else's overtime. I kept my face neutral, not cold, steady enough to be a place to land, not a spark. I shared what I could about Northline, nothing proprietary, all directional. There would be room to build, not just maintain. The language here felt different. Fewer metaphors, more verbs. Bring your questions, Rob had said. We'll trade answers for outcomes. My hands wrapped around the cup to make sure they didn't say too much. We settled the bill with the old choreography. Mark refuses my card. Lila tips like gratitude is a verb. At the door, Lila hesitated, then touched my arm. If we, she broke off, searching my face. You decide, I said. And if you land near me, I'll make sure the ground is solid. She nodded, eyes glossy but determined. Mark simply said, good. Outside, the air had that bright Colorado bite that makes even bad mornings feel clean. They walked toward the crosswalk together, an unplanned formation that made my throat tighten. I stood there and let the traffic wash by until the light changed and my feet remembered how to move. Back at the car, my phone buzzed, a number I recognized from a quiet corner of Clayton's org chart. I watched it ring out. Not my call. Not today. At home, I typed the first draft of my opening talk for Northline's kickoff. No grand speech, just a framework. Why we're here, how we'll decide, what we won't do. I added one line at the end that tasted like resolve in the mouth. We will not punish grief. We will not reward noise. We will move freight, and we will move like humans. I read it aloud and didn't need to edit the last sentence. Night found me with a small ritual: water the plant, place the folder, recheck the alarms. A text from an unknown number blinked onto my screen. Is it true you left? Rivera Imports. I didn't reply. I archived it like a spark I had no intention of feeding. Then I lay down and let the day pass over me like a river I'd finally decided to step into. Tomorrow, work begins. And currents have a way of choosing their banks if you give them a line to follow. The coffee shop felt smaller with all of us inside. Steam fogged the windows, spoons chimed like nervous birds. Mark took the end seat, shoulders square. Lila sat beside him, fingers laced around a mug that had stopped being hot. Omar arrived last, quiet as always, eyes steady in a way that steadies other people. I set my phone face down and let silence go first. They didn't make me ask. Ben spoke in bullet points: turnover risk, missed cadence, clients sniffing fear. Nina described Slack like a fever, messages splitting, looping back, saying nothing. Rosa pulled up a color-coded doc with tasks I used to carry alone now scattered like dropped screws. Jenna's voice barely rose above the grinder. It's not a job anymore. It's a warning. I told them what I told myself: I wouldn't recruit. I wouldn't nudge. My lane was clean. Their choices had to be theirs. I laid out the risks: non-competes that growl even when they won't bite, gaps between jobs, the math of rent meeting courage. Carla listened, then leaned in like a cross-examiner, finally standing up. If they can fire you for a funeral, she said, what exactly is stable here? The table went still. I felt the truth of it land in my chest like a stone that somehow made me breathe easier. Omar tapped the table once, a quiet vote. Mark's jaw eased. Lila's eyes shone, not with tears, but with decision. Okay, I said softly. If you move with eyes open. Rosa reached into her tote and slid a neat stack onto the wood. Printed confirmations. Dates, times, auto-replies. Thank you for applying Northline Dynamics. 8 names in black ink. 8 clocks already ticking. My throat tightened and stayed quiet. I never wanted followers. I wanted people to be safe. Sometimes those are the same fight. Would you have told them to wait? To be cautious until the wind changes? I wanted to wrap them all in bubble wrap and send them to a softer year. Instead, I aligned with what I could live with later. I'll vouch for your work, I said. That's it. You go through the process like anyone else. They nodded like people who had already walked across a bridge in their heads. We talked timelines. Jenna had a plan for knowledge transfer so clients wouldn't bleed on the way out. Ben had drafted handovers that didn't sabotage clean exits, no scorched earth. Nina flagged 2 projects that needed a controlled landing. Rosa volunteered to stay the extra week if offers lagged. Grown-ups at a table, choosing dignity while the building upstairs forgot how. I texted Rob under the table, short, careful words. 8 strong resumes incoming. I will not recruit. Merit only. He replied in under a minute, understood. Talent will review. Clean process. No fireworks, just a valve opening where pressure had been building. I exhaled and realized I'd been holding air since Tuesday. Mark looked at me the way little brothers look at big sisters when they don't want you to know that's what's happening. He admitted he'd already tuned his resume, that his resignation draft lived in his drafts labeled later. Later, he said, feels like a trap. Lila squeezed his arm, a silent yes. Across from them, Omar simply said, I'm ready. The micro-decisions turned into a shape. They would interview as themselves, not as my shadows. They would resign respectfully, not theatrically, when offers became paper and dates had ink. No mass email, no group selfie, no victory lap on social. Just 8 sober choices lining up like lights on a runway. I promised 2 things and only 2. I'd make one internal call to set expectation. These candidates bring results, not noise. And I'd do one thing on our side if they landed, shield them from politics while they found their footing. I would not, under any condition, be the reason Apex pointed fingers. Let culture indict itself. It's better at it than I could ever be. We split the bill the way we always did. Carla overtipped. Ben tried to reimburse. Lila laughed him down. Chairs scraped softly. Coats found shoulders. The door chimed like a small bell for a big decision. Outside, the sky had that pale Denver blue that makes even hard choices look honest. Hugs were quick, not because we were cold, but because we were ready. 8 people walked away in different directions, and somehow it felt like a line, not a scatter. Back at my apartment, the plant leaned toward the window as if it recognized the weather in me. I opened my laptop and wrote 1 page for Northline's talent team. Tenure, strengths, the moments I'd watched each of them choose the hard right over the easy wrong. No adjectives that sounded like hype. Only verbs that sounded like truth. I hit send and let the page close without rereading. Phone buzz. A new email from Northline HR, interviews scheduled rolling, this week and next. Another ping, Mark forwarding the confirmation with a single word booked. Then Lila, a heart, a calendar screenshot, the caption, let's build better. I stared at the screen until the brightness felt like daylight. I set the phone down and listened to the apartment settle. Old pipes clicked. The fridge hummed a tired lullaby. I thought of my father at the river, of stones and currents, of patience that isn't passive. Then I opened calendar and created a private event 3 days out, 9 a.m. No guests. Title, If They Jump. I didn't write more. I didn't need to. Because I knew what came with that title: handovers, handshakes, and the sound of paper sliding across desks upstairs. And I had a feeling that somewhere, a regional director would feel the floor tilt beneath her feet. Right before the first resignation hit her inbox. My phone rang at 9:12, the kind of ring that lands like a knock. Unknown number, local area code, a name blooming in my memory as the second tone hit. I answered with the voice I use for bridges, not fights. Lauren, this is Denise Walker. Regional Director. Calm on good days, steel when budgets bled. Today, her breath sounded like stairs. She didn't warm up. She reported casualties. 3 resignations this morning. 2 more on my desk. All from your former unit. She named them like a roll call at a damaged school. Each one listed Northline as the next destination. Then the question with teeth, did you orchestrate this? I let silence do the first draft. I told her people choose their own careers. I reminded her I had not recruited, not hinted, not sent a single "come with me" text. I said my lane stays clean because I intend to sleep at night. She inhaled, sharp, the way you do before cold water hits your skin. Denise said Craig had framed my termination as urgent performance remediation. She'd been in Scottsdale for a conference and came back to a rumor with a badge. No documentation trail. No coaching sessions. Just a Tuesday email and a floor on fire. "Why didn't you fight it?" she asked, softer. "You could have." I told her I chose something heavier than noise. I chose to move on. She pivoted fast, practiced, a pro at salvage. "Come back," she said. "Your old role, plus a raise. We'll issue a formal apology." Words rushed like water through a narrow pipe. "I'll answer for Craig. We'll make this right. Just come back." I pictured the office's lemon cleaner smell and felt my throat go cool. Would you have taken it? The raise, the apology, the neat rewrite of a rotten week? For a blink, my body wanted the shortcut, the illusion of control dressed as a return. Then my father's voice came back, low and steady. "Stones don't chase the river. They let the current reveal the banks." I thanked her for the offer. I declined. Denise pushed. "We'll match anything Northline offered and beat it." She tossed numbers into the air like confetti that didn't shine. She added a head of region title she could paper in by Friday. She promised to remove Craig from my chain of command. Promises stacked like chairs no one could sit on without wobbling. I told her money was never the problem. Respect was. Timing was. The way people matter or don't was the whole equation. "Your company punished bereavement," I said, keeping my voice level. "That isn't a paperwork error. That's a culture choice." The line went quiet except for an HVAC hiss I could almost see. She regrouped with a different weapon: fear. "The non-compete," she said. "You know we'll enforce it." Her words tried to make a cage shape in the air. I exhaled and watched the lines fail to connect. "Our counsel is ready," I said. "If your lawyers want to talk, they can call mine." A long pause, heavier than the last. When she spoke again, the steel had thinned. "I wasn't consulted, Lauren." The admission landed without spin. I would not have let this happen the way it did. I believed her, and I also believed in outcomes, not intentions. I asked a question I already knew the answer to. "When did you learn Craig approved my bereavement and fired me during it?" Another pause, heavier still. "Yesterday," she said. HR flagged the timeline. "It's not defensible." I heard something human break in that last word. She said the board had begun asking why the highest performing unit in the region was peeling off by noon. Vendors were jittery. Clients were texting their back channels. And all hands at 11 had the energy of a fire drill without doors. Denise said she could fix it if I came back and stood beside her. I pictured the scene and saw my shadow absorbing blame I didn't earn. "I won't be your PR bandage," I said, quiet, not cruel. "If the system holds, it's because the values hold, not because I hold my breath." She tried one last trade, an offer to front a public statement admitting mistakes. It almost worked. Almost. Then I remembered Tuesday at 6:07 a.m. and the almost turned to no. "Would you have asked for Craig's head as a condition?" It flashed through me quick, tempting, small. I let it pass. This wasn't about one man. It was about the math of how they saw people. Cost centers, not commitments. No single firing fixes that equation. I set down the rules one more time. I had accepted another role. I would not solicit. I would not gloat. If people chose a different road, I would make sure the ground on my side was solid. Their lawyers could email mine regarding the non-compete, and we would answer in kind. I wished her well. Not the polite kind, the kind I actually meant. She exhaled like a swimmer hitting air. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The second one sounded like truth catching up. "I'm going to try to save what's left of this team." I told her I hoped she did. I also told her that saving starts with how you treat the next grieving employee. Silence answered me. Then a soft, "You're right." We disconnected without ceremony. I set the phone on the counter and let the fridge hum fill the room. A text from Mark arrived seconds later. 2 down. Offers in hand. Another from Lila. Interview done. Felt good. I stood there, palms on the edge of the counter, and watched the future sort itself like freight onto the right trucks. The phone lit up again, Megan this time. No call. A text, off record, leadership pulled Craig from meetings. Administrative review. Another light, a board calendar block screenshot, forwarded from someone braver than policy. Emergency session, 4 p.m. Paper walls shake when enough hands press. I walked to the window and looked at the thin winter sun trying to be enough. In the glass, I saw a woman holding steady while current moved around her. Not a hero. Not a storm. Just a stone choosing where to stand. I whispered, "We build," into the quiet room like a password that opens the right doors. Then my phone vibrated again, an unfamiliar number from the same building as the board. Would you have answered? Or let it ring and make them feel the pause? I watched the screen glow, counted 3 beats, and lifted it slowly. "Lauren Brooks," I said. A careful voice cleared its throat on the other end. "Ms. Brooks, the board would like to ask a few questions." The board's voice sounded like carpeted hallways, soft, expensive, careful with footprints. They asked for context, the way people ask for oxygen after blowing out the candle. I kept it clean. The 6:07 a.m. email, the approved bereavement, the lack of documentation. No adjectives. No anger. Just dates, times, and the way silence followed each one. When they probed about returning, I said I had already moved forward. They thanked me in tones that tried not to leak fear. A chair scraped somewhere on their end. A cough hid behind a muted mic. I directed them to Megan's records and ended the call without leaving a door ajar. My hands didn't shake when I set the phone down. The relief wasn't triumph, it was alignment, like bones finally seated where they belong. At 7:02 the next morning, I walked into Northline with a badge that buzzed green. The office smelled like early coffee and unlocked ideas. I started the kickoff with a short map: who we are, what we do, what we refuse. No slogans, only verbs: listen, clarify, remove friction, protect people, deliver results. Heads nodded the way heads do when words feel like walls you can lean on. Rob checked in between meetings, not to hover, but to clear runway. He asked what I needed removed. I named 3 roadblocks. 2 were gone by lunch. The third died quietly after a phone call I didn't have to make. I wrote a thank you note to his ops lead and meant every line. Leadership isn't noise, it's subtraction. By noon, talent pinged me with a rolling schedule. Interviews for Mark and Lila first, Omar and Ben next, then the rest. I sent a 1-paragraph brief to each interviewer, just the verbs, just the outcomes. No halos, no myths. If the work shines, it shines under bright light. Would you have hovered? I didn't. Trust is louder when it moves quietly. Megan called that afternoon from a place that sounded like a stairwell. Her voice carried apology and the relief of finally telling the truth. Craig had been placed on administrative leave pending review, bereavement handling, leave approvals, a pattern of performance remediation with no trail. The board had requested timelines from HR that didn't bend under pressure. She told me she documented everything for what it's worth. It was worth a lot. Then she said the part 1 felt in my teeth. Leadership had noticed the same detail my team felt by instinct. The highest performing unit didn't trickle away, it stepped off the building together. Clients were pinging back-channel lines, asking who owned lanes, who owned mistakes. Denise was trying to plug holes with both hands while the water came in from the ceiling. I thanked Megan for calling and asked her to take care of herself, not just the binders. She laughed once, softly, and said she'd keep a bag packed. We ended the call before kindness turned into something she'd have to report. A minute later, she texted a screenshot: emergency board session, 4 p.m. personnel review. I let the image sit on my screen until the pixels started to hum. Interviews began like good weather, calm, focused, no storm chasers. Mark's feedback hit my inbox first, direct. Measured. Owns his numbers. Lila's note read like someone finally took off a weight she didn't know how to name. Omar's panel loved that he spoke when necessary and never to hear himself talk. Rosa impressed talent by offering a transition plan that protected clients over pride. By Thursday, offers were drafted with the care of people who understand consequences. Salary bands were honest. Titles matched work, not ego. I asked for staggered start dates so Apex's remaining staff wouldn't drown on principle. Rob agreed without a speech. We set up a quiet schedule. 1 acceptance Monday, 2 Wednesday, the rest by Friday. That night we met at a small restaurant that smelled like basil and new beginnings. No speeches, no toasts with metaphors, just food, laughter, and relief that didn't need volume. I watched my 8 sit around a table that felt built for us on purpose. Mark talked shop with a grin I hadn't seen in months. Lila's hands finally stopped shaking when she laughed. Ben confessed he'd been sleeping with his laptop open, waiting for alarms that never rang. Nina said she hadn't realized how loud her office heartbeat was until it got quiet. Rosa told us she'd turned down a counteroffer that added money but subtracted dignity. Jenna whispered that she'd cried once, just once, when her offer letter landed, then put the tears away and got to work. Omar raised his water glass and said the simplest sentence of the night, "We build." I didn't give a speech. I gave a promise. I would shield, not smother. I would measure, not micromanage. We would write our cadence in a way that made handoffs graceful and mistakes survivable. We would refuse the old superstition that brutality creates excellence. Excellence, I reminded them, is quiet repetition done by people who feel safe enough to think. My phone face down on the table buzzed against the wood. A news alert. Apex Horizon Board initiates internal review. Operations manager on leave. The article was thin, like they'd been fed a statement that was still bleeding. No names beyond operations manager, no mention of bereavement, just evaluation of practices. I didn't show the table. I let them eat the night without headlines. After dinner, the check arrived with a flourish and a pen that had seen too many nervous hands. Rob had quietly called ahead and covered the bill. The server smiled when we realized and said, "He told me not to make a thing of it." We didn't. We tipped well anyway. Generosity is best when it doesn't ask for the light. Outside, the air held that soft Denver chill that keeps people honest. We stood under a string of warm bulbs and promised each other boring excellence. No grand vows, just calendars and clarity. Lila hugged me hard enough to reset something in my spine. Mark said, "See you Monday, boss," then smirked at the word like it finally fit. Back home, I opened my window and let the city hum earn its place. I watered the plant and set my father's note against the glass where the night could read it. Hold steady. Water remembers who stands. I stood in the quiet and watched the day settle into a line I could follow. Near midnight, Megan texted one more line. Board pulled last year's terminations. Pattern review. Another ping followed from an unknown number that smelled like PR. Apex Horizon to release statement Monday regarding updated leave policies and leadership changes. The words felt like a patch on a sinking boat. Policy is easy to edit. Culture is a riverbed. It takes time to move rock. Would you have taken a victory lap, posted a thread, named names? Every cell in me knew better. Our work would be the only announcement worth reading. Still, I felt the current shift, subtle, undeniable, the way a river bends before anyone can see the turn. I killed the lamp and let darkness make the room honest. On my phone, a calendar reminder blinked for tomorrow. First hires, onboarding plan. I smiled at the 2 words that mattered more than any headline. First hires. Then another alert slid onto the screen, quiet and sharp as a new blade. Client check-in request, Clayton Manufacturing. Monday, 10 a.m. Are you available? Monday at 10 a.m. Clayton's ops director stared at me through a clean camera lens. Their conference room was so quiet I could hear someone uncap a pen. I walked them through our plan like I was setting a bone firm, careful, no drama. We covered handoffs, escalation windows, and how we'd hold ourselves when freight got ugly. I didn't mention Apex. I didn't need to. Good service speaks in complete sentences. By Wednesday, Clayton signed a transition schedule that read like a trust fall in bullet points. Lanes moved in waves, not splashes. The first week closed without fireworks, just freight arriving when the screen said it would. Juan in their warehouse texted Lila a single word at 2:07 a.m. Smooth. Small words can move continents. 2 weeks later, Rivera Imports called after pretending not to know my number. They asked about our cross-dock plan if a port seized up overnight. I answered with a diagram I'd drawn on a whiteboard at 6 a.m. and photographed with my phone. They liked that it didn't look pretty. They liked that it worked. By Friday, the contract slid across Rob's desk and landed in my inbox with a quiet thud. Momentum found us like whether you stop checking, because the sky keeps its promise. 2 more clients followed, one for perishable lanes, one for specialized overdimension. Not poached. Not chased. Just people deciding they wanted to breathe while they did their jobs. We documented obsessively and bragged never. Every win got a post-mortem. Every near miss got 2. We tuned the engine until the sound changed. Dock-to-dock cycle times tightened. Manual checks dropped without losing safety. A bottleneck that had lived inside our Tuesday reports died on a Thursday afternoon and didn't leave flowers. We kept measuring until the numbers felt like music and not like threat. For months in, I stood at the far end of the executive table, palms flat on wood. Quarterly review. Slides that didn't waste nouns. Mountain region, roughly 34% growth. For client acquisitions, 2 legacy Apex accounts, 2 brand new. Operating costs down about 19% after we cut the rituals that only performed work. Rob didn't clap. I liked that about him. He let the room breathe, then said what mattered: keep the signal, kill the noise. He gave the credit to the team, and the team threw it back like a frisbee that never hits the ground. On the way out, he stopped me by the map and tapped Colorado with a knuckle. "Whatever you're doing," he said quietly, "teach it twice." We celebrated that night without speeches. Someone ordered a sheet cake and had the bakery write Independence Month in blue icing. Mark laughed like sleep had finally remembered his address. Lila toasted with sparkling water and didn't cry. She just smiled like muscles relearning ease. Omar handed me a small card that said, "Thank you for choosing Build." No signature. He didn't need one. News alerts started pinging during the cleanup, screens lighting faces in little blue squares. Apex Horizon announces restructuring. Operations manager exits following review. The wording was careful, like someone writing with oven mitts on. No mention of bereavement. No mention of how the floor learned to fear its own breath. A later piece said Denise was stabilizing regional operations, which is what people say when they're sprinting with a fire extinguisher. I didn't feel triumph. I felt math. Treat people like parts, and your system fails in predictable ways. You can optimize a spreadsheet, you cannot spreadsheet a soul. I thought of Tuesday at 6:07 a.m. and the way a sentence can change a building. Then I looked around our room and saw what we were building instead. We kept our cadence boring and our results loud. Weekly stand-ups started and ended on time. Escalations got names, not blame. We put grief protocol into the handbook with the same gravity as safety procedures. No one had to earn compassion. It came standard, like breaks. Would you have posted about the wins, tagged the right people, and harvested applause? I drafted a thread and deleted it before the first comma. We weren't a story, we were a practice. The best proof doesn't trend. It repeats. At the end of the quarter, my team surprised me with a photo I didn't expect to love. All of us in the warehouse at golden hour, sleeves pushed up, forklifts sleeping in the background. No makeup of a moment, just a line of people who had decided to work in daylight. They framed it in simple wood and wrote one sentence on the back: "We're not going back." Later that night, my phone buzzed with 2 messages that didn't belong in the same minute. A reporter asking for comment on culture failures at Apex. And a text from Denise. "Audit nearly done. I owe you an apology. Lunch?" I stared at the screen while the city hummed through the window. I thought about the river, how it bends without asking permission. How stones don't shout when the water finally changes course, they just shine a little in the sun. I typed a reply, simple and clear, then put the phone face down beside my father's note. "Hold steady. Water remembers who stands." And the current had one more turn left in it. The sail hit on a rainy Thursday, the headline small and surgical. Orion Cargo Group would absorb Apex Horizon's assets at a steep discount. Contracts, equipment, leases, the usual transfer listed in tidy, bloodless lines. No mention of what really moved, the people who chose themselves. I read it once and closed the tab. Some endings don't deserve a replay. Denise texted 2 hours later, a simple lunch, and a pin by the South Platte. We met on a bench where the river sounds like a long exhale. She looked thinner, not in body, in armor. Apologies way less when they're real. She spoke first. Auditors, timelines, leadership practices flagged in red. Culture failed us, she said. Not operations. Not you. The sentence landed like truth finally seated. I told her I believed she tried to fix it and that intent still matters. But outcomes matter more, and the outcome was printed in yesterday's filing. She asked if walking away instead of suing had been worth it. I watched the river scuff the stones and felt my father's lesson come home. What would a courtroom have given me, I asked, that this team hasn't? We ate in a quiet that felt like respect. Denise said she'd signed with a consulting firm on culture rebuilds. Starting somewhere small, she added, almost smiling. Learning to ask better questions. We stood, shook hands, and didn't promise too much. Not enemies, not allies, two professionals who finally stopped arguing with the current. 14 months after the 6:07 a.m. email, Northline changed my badge. Executive Vice President, Western Region. No confetti, just a meeting room that smelled like dry erase and good coffee. Rob thanked me publicly, then thanked the team twice as loudly. He said I'd turn subtraction into strategy and culture into throughput. I wrote it down to remember later. Our 8 all rose, one by one, like stairs appearing while you climb. Mark runs analytics now, the kind that saves fuel and faces. Lila leads client relations, where empathy isn't a script, it's the job. Omar architects lanes and whispers calm into chaos when storms close ports. Ben, Carla, Nina, Rosa, Jenna, each moved into roles that matched their edges and their fire. We built small rituals that mean more than slogans. A grief protocol with real time, not performative sympathy. Quarterly teachbacks, where the newest voice goes first. A standing rule. If your fix humiliates someone, it isn't a fix. It's boring management that produces interesting results, which is the only kind I trust. One morning, a brown package sat on my desk like a polite secret. No return address, just my name in a hand I recognized from signed forms. Inside, my old desk plant, alive and almost jaunty, soil wrapped in care. A note folded twice. They're closing the Denver offices. Thought this belonged with you. M. I placed the plant on the sill and let it relearn the light. That night, I carried the note to the river like a small ritual. Wind pushed against my coat. The water kept its steady argument with time. I remembered the funeral, the Tuesday email, the box that wasn't heavy until it was. I remembered 8 chairs in a coffee shop and the sound of people choosing. Anger had burned off long ago. What stayed was shape of decisions, of days, of who I'd become. A message blinked from an unknown reporter, hungry for a quote about Apex's collapse. I left it unanswered. Our proof didn't need narration. Another buzz, gentler, Megan with a photo of an empty floor and good luck typed in careful lines. I wished her safety, the kind that makes people sleep through the night. Then I put the phone away and listened to what the water knows. Would suing have changed the river or only echoed the splash? I chose the quieter hinge, the one that opens into rooms and years. We didn't win by breaking what broke us. We won by refusing its blueprint. Every shipment on time, every teammate promoted, every client exhale, that's the verdict I keep. It reads better than any injunction. I thought of Craig in the passive voice of press releases, then let the thought go. I thought of Denise starting over with hard questions, and that one I kept. I thought of my father, hands sure on a knot, telling me patience is muscle. He taught me how stones hold their place without shouting at the flood. He never said it was easy. He knew it was enough. Back home, the plant caught late sun and threw a small green shadow. I straightened the frame from the warehouse photo and felt the room align. On my desk, tomorrow's agenda was already neat. Problems to remove, people to protect. The batch felt light for once, almost irrelevant against the weight of the work. I turned off the light and let the quiet find its chair. In the dark, one last line walked in and asked to stay. Revenge wasn't taking something back. It was building something no one could take. So I wrote it down and left it there, simple and true. Sometimes a stone doesn't fight the river. It becomes the shore.